The morning light came through my kitchen window the way it always does in October, soft and golden, like the world is trying to apologize for what's coming. I was standing at the stove making oatmeal, the same breakfast I've made for myself every single morning for the past 4 years, ever since my husband Gerald passed. 63 years old, retired school teacher, and the proudest thing I ever did in my life was raise my son Daniel on my own after Gerald got sick. I gave that boy everything. My time, my savings, my whole heart. I never imagined he would use it against me. I need to tell you what happened, because I think some of you out there might be living a version of this story right now. And if you are, I want you to hear how mine ended. Daniel is my only child. 38 years old, works as an accountant, married a woman named Nicole about 3 years ago. She's sharp, polished, the kind of woman who notices everything in a room and files it away for later. When they first started dating, I told myself I liked her. She was ambitious, organized, driven. Gerald always said I was too trusting, and God, I wish he'd been wrong. After the wedding, Daniel called me one Sunday afternoon, said he and Nicole were having some unexpected repairs done on their condo. Plumbing issues, mold behind the walls, the whole nightmare. Could they stay with me for 2 or 3 months while the contractors finished up? I said yes without a second thought. This is my son. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a building I've owned outright since 2019. Paid it off with the life insurance money after Gerald died. It's not fancy, but it's mine. Every single inch of it is mine. 2 months turned into 6, 6 turned into 14, and somewhere in that stretch of time, something shifted in the way Daniel and Nicole moved through my home. Like they'd stopped being guests and started being landlords. It started small, the way these things always do. Nicole rearranged my kitchen cabinets one Tuesday while I was at my book club. Said it was more efficient. I came home and couldn't find my own coffee mugs. Then she started making comments about my groceries. Too much sodium. Too many carbs. Did I really need that second box of crackers? I'm a grown woman. I taught 4th grade for 31 years. I know how to buy crackers. Then one evening, Daniel sat down across from me at the dinner table and said, very casually, the way you'd mentioned the weather, that maybe it was time for me to think about simplifying my finances. He said he'd noticed I was making withdrawals from my savings account more often, and he was worried. He suggested I add him to the account just so he could keep an eye on things. I told him I appreciated the concern, but I was fine. He smiled and dropped it. I didn't think much of it at the time. 3 weeks later, Nicole mentioned, again, very casually, that one of her coworkers had a mother who'd been showing signs of early memory issues and hadn't even realized it herself. She looked at me over her wine glass with this expression I can only describe as practiced sympathy. She said it might be worth getting a cognitive screening, just to have a baseline. I said I was fine. She said, of course you are. Just something to consider. That was the second time I didn't listen to the alarm bell ringing in the back of my head. The third time, I couldn't ignore it. It was a Wednesday morning in March. Daniel had left early for work. Nicole was in the guest room with the door closed, and I assumed she was on a work call. I was sitting at my kitchen table with my second cup of coffee, and my phone was charging on the counter. Daniel's phone was on the table. He'd forgotten it in his rush to leave. I wasn't trying to snoop. I want to be clear about that. I was going to set it aside on the kitchen counter and text him from my phone to let him know he'd left it. That was all. But as I reached for it, the screen lit up with a notification, a voice memo, and in the split second before the screen went dark, I saw the label he'd given it. It said, Mom Apartment Plan, Nicole Review. I sat very still for a long moment. I know I shouldn't have listened. I know that. But I also know that when your child labels a secret recording with your name on it, something deep and animal inside you already understands what's happening before your brain catches up. I picked up his phone. I opened the voice memos app, and I listened. It was Daniel's voice, low and clipped, like he was dictating notes to himself. He said that the cognitive screening appointment was scheduled for April. He said that Nicole's contact at the elder law firm had confirmed that a documented diagnosis, even a mild one, combined with a signed power of attorney, would be sufficient to initiate a property transfer. He said the plan was to move forward before summer because, and I remember this word for word, she won't fight it if she thinks we're doing it for her own good. He was talking about me, his own mother. He was building a paper trail to take my home. I set the phone down on the table exactly where I'd found it. I picked up my coffee. I drank it. I watched a pigeon on the windowsill outside, and I thought, with a clarity that surprised me, do not let them see your face change. I want to tell you that I cried. I did later, in the bathroom with the fan on so Nicole wouldn't hear. I sat on the edge of the tub and I let myself feel it for exactly as long as I could afford to. And then I washed my face, put on my reading glasses, and started thinking. I had taught children for 31 years. I know what it looks like when someone underestimates you. And I know that the most powerful thing you can do in that moment is let them keep doing it. I did not say a word to Daniel or Nicole. Not that morning, not that week. I made dinner. I asked about their days. I watched Nicole watch me with that careful, measuring look, and I smiled back at her the way I used to smile at parents during difficult conferences. Warm, open, utterly unreadable. But I was moving. The first call I made was to my friend Patricia. We taught at the same school for 20 years. Her husband is a retired estate attorney, and when I explained what I'd heard, he told me to come over that same afternoon and bring every piece of financial documentation I had. I will not pretend I did this alone. I want to say that clearly because I think sometimes these stories make it sound like one person outsmarts everyone through sheer force of will, and that's not the truth. I had help. Good, honest, loyal help. And that made all the difference. Patricia's husband, Robert, spent 3 hours with me at their dining room table. He explained exactly what Daniel and Nicole were attempting. They needed two things: a documented cognitive impairment and a power of attorney signed by me. Without both, they couldn't touch the apartment. The cognitive screening appointment was their first step. They were hoping I'd go in, answer some questions, and come out with a note that said something ambiguous enough to use. The POA was the second step. They'd frame it as routine planning and slide it in front of me to sign after the appointment when I was presumably rattled and looking for reassurance. Robert said the good news was that neither of those things had happened yet. The apartment was still fully legally mine. The bad news was that if I confronted Daniel directly, they might accelerate the timeline or find another angle. He told me to do nothing obvious. Instead, he referred me to an estate attorney named Miriam who specialized in exactly this kind of situation: adult children attempting to exploit elder law procedures against a parent. I met with Miriam the following Monday. While Daniel thought I was at my book club, she was in her 50s, wore bright red glasses, and had the energy of someone who had seen every version of this story and never stopped being angry about it. She told me that what Daniel and Nicole were planning was not just unethical. Depending on how far they took it, it could constitute financial fraud. She helped me do 3 things. First, we drafted a new estate document that made my wishes about the apartment absolutely explicit. It was to remain in my name, and any attempt to transfer it without notarized consent from me and a witness of my choosing would be immediately contestable. Second, she advised me to quietly open a new savings account at a different bank in my name alone and begin transferring my funds there before the April appointment. Third, she told me to document everything I could remember: dates, conversations, the voice memo, in a signed, dated letter that she kept in her files. I went home that Monday evening and made spaghetti. Nicole said it was good. I said thank you. Daniel asked if I'd thought any more about the cognitive screening. I said I'd made an appointment. He smiled at Nicole across the table and she smiled back. I ate my spaghetti. The cognitive screening appointment came on a Thursday in April. I went. I answered every question. I counted backward from 100 by sevens. I named the current president, the season, the city I was in. I drew a clock face showing 10 minutes past 11, and I drew it correctly. The neurologist, a calm woman named Dr. Osei, looked at my results and told me my cognitive function was well within normal range for my age. She said I was in excellent health. I asked her to give me 2 copies of that report. When I handed the second copy to Miriam, she set it on her desk and said, "Good. Now we wait for them to make their next move." They didn't wait long. 2 weeks after the screening, Nicole set a folder on the kitchen table one evening while Daniel sat across from me with his hands folded and his expression arranged into something he probably thought looked caring. Nicole said she'd spoken to an estate planner, a friend of a friend, and they'd drawn up a simple power of attorney document. Just for emergencies. Just so that if anything ever happened to me suddenly, Daniel could handle things without delays. She pushed the folder toward me. I looked at the folder. I looked at Daniel. I thought of Gerald, who always said I was too trusting. I thought of 31 years of fourth graders who learned that actions have consequences. I said, I'll have my attorney look at it. The silence that followed was very loud. Nicole said, Your attorney? I said, yes. I've been working with an estate attorney for a few weeks now, just getting everything in order. She's wonderful. I'll have her call you. Daniel's face did something complicated. He said, very carefully, Mom, you don't need an attorney for something this simple. I said, that's probably true, but I like being thorough. You know how I am. I smiled at him the way I used to smile at difficult parents. Warm, open, utterly unreadable. Miriam sent them a letter the following week. It was 3 pages long. It outlined, in precise legal language, that I was fully competent, that my estate documents were in order, that any further attempts to obtain power of attorney or initiate any property-related actions without my explicit witness consent would be referred to the appropriate authorities for review. It also noted, very politely, that the voice memo on Daniel's phone constituted documentation of premeditated intent. I do not know exactly what happened between Daniel and Nicole after that letter arrived. I was not there for that conversation, but I can tell you that by the end of May, they had moved out. They didn't yell. There was no dramatic confrontation. Daniel knocked on my bedroom door one evening and stood in the hallway and said they'd found a place and would be out by the weekend. He looked at me for a long moment like he was waiting for me to say something that would make it easier. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. He left. I stood at my window and watched their car pull out of the parking lot on a Saturday morning in late May with a U-Haul box truck behind it. The pigeon was on the windowsill again. The sky was that same October apology gold, except it was May. The world trying to make it up to you. I won't tell you I healed quickly. I won't tell you it didn't hurt. This was my son. I spent 18 years waking up every morning with one job, and that job was to make sure he was okay. And somewhere along the way, he decided my value was real estate. That is a grief that doesn't have a clean edge to it. It just sits in you, and you learn to carry it differently over time. What I will tell you is what I did next. I called Patricia, and we went to lunch. I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center, something I'd been meaning to do for 3 years. I had dinner twice a week with a neighbor named Evelyn who is 71 and makes the best cornbread I have ever tasted in my life. I called my former students when they reached out. I started sleeping through the night again. I also want to tell you something practical because I think it matters. I am not a wealthy woman. I was a teacher. But I had one asset that I had worked my entire adult life to own outright. And the lesson I learned is this. As long as you are alive and competent, that asset is yours. Do not add your children to your financial accounts out of convenience. Do not sign documents because someone you love tells you it's simple. Do not dismiss your instincts because the person who benefits from your confusion is someone who once called you mom. Find a good attorney. Find one before you need them urgently. Robert and Patricia pointed me toward Miriam, and Miriam changed the outcome of my life. I didn't do this alone. I want to say that one more time. I had people, and having people, the right people, is not a luxury. It is a plan. My apartment is quiet these days. Mornings, I make my oatmeal, the light comes in through the kitchen window and I sit with my coffee and I do not cook anyone else's breakfast. I do not wonder who is watching my face for signs of confusion. I do not practice keeping my expression steady. I am 63 years old. I am a retired school teacher. I am the owner of a 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor that I paid for with 31 years of work, and a loss I still carry every day. I know what day it is. I know who the president is. I can count backward from 100 by sevens without blinking. And I know the difference between a son who loves you and a man who is waiting for you to become easy to manage. I loved my son for 38 years before I understood that love is not the same as safety, that the people who know your softness the best are also the ones who know exactly where to press. I don't know what Daniel tells people about what happened. I don't know if he tells them anything at all. I know that Nicole's name no longer appears on my phone, and that when Daniel's number comes up, which is rare now and always brief, I answer it the way I would answer a call from someone I used to know well, politely, carefully. From a distance, if you are watching this and you recognize something in what I've shared, a child who's gotten too interested in your finances, a partner who suggests you let them handle things, someone who makes you feel like your memory is the problem rather than their behavior, please hear me when I say, trust that feeling. Write things down. Find someone you trust who is not connected to the situation. Call an estate attorney. You worked for what you have. You are not confused. You are not a burden. You are not a problem to be managed before it gets complicated. You are the whole point. The morning light is coming through my window right now as I write this, and I want you to know that it is still beautiful, that the oatmeal is still good, that a pigeon still lands on my windowsill most mornings and looks at me with that expression pigeons have, like they know something, and they're not particularly impressed by any of it. I am okay, more than okay. And if my story helps even one of you sit up a little straighter and make one phone call you've been putting off, then this is the most useful thing I've done since I retired from teaching. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your paperwork. And never, not for a single moment, let anyone convince you that your best years are already behind you. They are not. There is something I have learned about the way consequences work, not as punishment handed down from somewhere above, but as the natural result of the choices we make and the character we build or fail to build over a lifetime. Daniel did not become the man who sat across my dinner table hiding a plan behind a smile overnight. That kind of willingness to deceive someone who loves you, to look at a person's vulnerability and see an opportunity rather than a responsibility, that is built slowly through 100 small decisions to take the easier path instead of the right one. I do not say this with bitterness. I say it because I think it is true and because I think it matters. The choices we make in private, when no one is watching, when there is no consequence in the immediate moment, are the choices that shape who we actually are. Daniel and Nicole made their choices privately, in a voice memo on a phone they thought was safe. And those choices, made in private, became the architecture of everything that followed. What I did, the months of stillness, the quiet calls, the careful steps, was also built from choices I had been making for a long time. 31 years of teaching children meant 31 years of learning to stay calm when things felt urgent, to think clearly when the easiest thing would be to react. That patience, that steadiness, was not something I found in a crisis. It was something I had been building without knowing I would need it. I think about that a lot now. The way the qualities we develop in ordinary life become the tools we reach for in extraordinary moments. I was not exceptional. I was simply someone who had spent decades practicing patience, paying attention, and asking for help without shame. Those three things saved my home. Not cleverness, not luck. Practice. The hardest part of this story, the part I carry quietly, is that I still love my son. Love does not evaporate because someone disappoints you in a fundamental way. It changes shape. It becomes something you hold at a distance, carefully, the way you'd carry something that once burned you. You don't throw it away. You just learn to hold it differently. And Nicole, I think about what it takes to look at a 63-year-old woman who welcomed you into her home and see a transaction. I do not understand it. But I also know that I am not responsible for understanding it. I am only responsible for protecting myself from it. If you are watching this and you are somewhere in the middle of a situation like mine, not yet certain, not yet ready to act, just quietly uneasy, I want to tell you that the unease is information. Your instincts are not paranoia. The people who love you do not make you feel like a problem to be managed. They do not suggest you sign things quickly. They do not watch your face for signs of confusion. Trust the unease. Write things down. Find one person outside the situation who you trust completely and tell them. Then find a professional and tell them too. You do not have to be certain before you take a step. You only have to be willing to find out the truth, even when part of you is hoping you're wrong. I was hoping I was wrong. I wasn't. And knowing the truth, even when it hurt, was the only thing that let me act in time. Your life is worth protecting. Your home, your savings, your autonomy. These are not small things. They are the result of a lifetime of work and sacrifice, and you are allowed to defend them quietly and legally and without apology. The morning light still comes through my kitchen window. The oatmeal is still good. And I am still here, on my own terms, in a home that belongs to me. That is everything.